So, shall we read? We have to read it. Who will read?
I can read, Ranganath.
Okay, go ahead. The mind recoils.
The mind recoils by pain and dislike from the adverse strokes of life. That is nature's device for enforcing a principle of self protection, jugupsa, so that the vulnerable nervous and bodily parts of us may not unduly rush upon self destruction to embrace it. It takes joy in the favorable touches of life, that is, nature's lure of rajasic pleasure, so that the force in the creature may overcome the tamasic tendencies of inertia and inactivity and be impelled fully towards action, desire, struggle, success, and by its attachment to these things, her ends may be worked out. Our secret soul takes a pleasure in this strife and effort, and even a pleasure in adversity and suffering, which can be complete enough in memory and retrospect, but is present too behind at the time and often even rises to the surface of the afflicted mind to support it in its passion. But what really attracts the soul is the whole mingled weft of the thing we call life, with all its disturbance of struggle and seeking, its attractions and repulsions, its offer and its menace, its varieties of every kind. To the Rajasic desire soul in us, a monotonous pleasure, success without struggle, joy without a shadow, must, after a time, become fatiguing, insipid, cloying. It needs a background of darkness to give full value to its enjoyment of life, light. For the happiness it seeks and enjoys is of that very nature. It is in its very essence relative and dependent on the perception and experience of its opposite. The joy of the soul in the dualities is the secret of the mind's pleasure in living.
Okay, very interesting paragraph. And he is justifying the so many things which nature has given to us, which is absolutely essential in the beginning. But when you want to go ahead, then that becomes a problem. Just like the famous sentence that everybody knows and understands, ego was the helper, ego is the bar. Exactly in the same way, everything is a helper and everything is a bar. And we'll see what all those things are. So I'm reading each sentence. The mind recoils by pain and dislike from the adverse strokes of life. Adverse strokes of life, that which is unpleasant and gives you pain, or that which gives you emotional hurt. Okay? That is unpleasant. But note interestingly that the soul takes pleasure in all. There is a big difference between the soul taking pleasure and the mind taking pleasure. The soul takes pleasure in everything because it wants experience. Okay? It is by experience of the world that is it grows. And the experience has to be not only positive but also negative. Then it grows. Okay. So the soul takes.
Ranganath,
Yes, tell me.
the soul here is the psychic being, no?
Yes, you can say that. Yeah, that's it. The psychic being, um, it takes pleasure in a certain sense, that's right. Okay. But it tries to later on when the psychic emerges, it certainly doesn't want suffering and it certainly doesn't want falsehood. Okay. So when Sridhar is saying soul, he's talking in a very general way in the beginning. Okay. But afterwards, when the soul becomes a psychic being, the psychic being rejects all that is undivine and all that is the opposite of Satchidananda. That will come to later on. Right now, the soul wants experience. So it welcomes all. But we are not conscious of our soul, we are conscious only of our mind. And that also not fully. Okay. So the mind recoils by pain and dislike from the adverse strokes of life. That is nature's device for enforcing a principle of self-protection, jugupsa. Jugupsa is a withdrawing and a going away from that which hurts. Okay, so that the vulnerable nervous and bodily parts of us may not unduly rush upon self-destruction to embrace it. This is exactly, actually, the Jugupsa is nature's protection to you. Okay? Fear also. Fear is a nature has given you fear so that it protects you. Imagine a small child puts his hand in fire and gets burned. He doesn't know. Okay? So if you don't know, the next time it happens, the fear operates, okay, and the unpleasantness operates. So you actually protect yourself. So fear, which is so inimical to yoga, is absolutely essential in the beginning. Okay. In that way, if you see, we'll come to it later on. All the negatives that are there, greed, okay, hate, all these things are necessary in the beginning, but they become unnecessary and even a harmful thing when you want to go higher up. That which was helpful earlier becomes a burden afterwards, and you want to get rid of it. And why does this happen? Why does the wrong things also become steady and last? Because of stability. If there is no stability in the physical world, all the forms will start moving. So, and if you are moving all the time, then how can you deal with something which is in the physical world? Practically, it becomes impossible to live. If I am talking to Pallavi, spoke to me just now. If I am talking to Pallavi, she must remain what she is. If she goes on changing form, then I don't know to whom I'm speaking. So, stability and permanence is relative in the physical world, but absolutely essential. Therefore, this stability principle applies to everything. It applies to hate, it applies to the attachment to things. Okay? They are all necessary at the beginning. That's what Srimad is pointing out. So what he said here, self-protection, it can apply. He is here talking only of the physical body, but the same thing also to a certain extent to the vital and the mind. Okay? So, so it takes it takes joy in the favorable touches of life, the mind. That is nature's lure of rajasic pleasure. Now that's also interesting, we'll discuss it. It takes, that is nature's lure of rajasic pleasure, so that the force in the creature may overcome the tamasic tendencies of inertia and inactivity and be impelled fully towards action, desire, struggle, success. And by its attachment to these things, her ends may be worked out. Nature wants the species to exist for long. Otherwise, her purpose is not served. So nature wants you to maintain your body. And how do you do that? By eating. And so nature gives you greed. So that is something positive. If you don't have greed, then you won't eat. Okay? So it forces you to eat. It's the same principle with also sex. Okay? It wants the species to continue forever. And therefore it makes the process very pleasant in the beginning, which becomes a huge problem later on when you want to go even beyond that. So everything in the physical world which is negative is absolutely essential. That is nature's device to prolong her stability in the physical world. Okay? So this is the interesting part. Okay? And action, so desire also, it gives you desire. So desire and greed so that you may eat sufficiently and you'll then continue to live. Okay? And desire it gives you because otherwise, where are you coming from? Life is coming from where? Life is coming from matter. And what is the principle of matter? Tamas. And what does tamas mean? Stability, unwillingness to move. So if you don't move and don't eat, then you will die. So therefore, nature gives you greed and nature also gives you desire. So that it shakes off the tamas. You have to go from tamas to action, to rajas. And so therefore it gives you desire and This principle of desire is very interesting. It is used by governments even in developing certain areas. Okay, so it's a very useful thing. In economics, you know that. What they do is, suppose there is a district in the country which is very backward. So what they say, they encourage the industrialists to open industries there. Okay? And why will the industrialists open? They give the principle of desire. If you go and open an industry there, they will give you free electricity for 5 years. They will not take income tax from you from 5 years. So this is and will also give you a subsidy for your labor. All these are tricks to ensure development. So you use negative things to do positive things. Okay, that's exactly what nature is doing. Okay? Now I go to the next one. Our secret soul takes a pleasure in this strife and effort, and even a pleasure in adversity and suffering, which can be complete enough in memory and retrospect, but is present too behind at the time and often even rises to the surface of the afflicted mind to support it in its passion. Now, this is a very interesting thing what Sri is saying. We'll have a look at it. Okay? He has told you earlier that in the previous para, he has told you that a Kshatriya takes pleasure in his vocation, in his profession. He likes to fight, he wants to fight. And that's why he has used the word holiday of a fight. Okay? It is something pleasant for him. Okay? So exactly in the same way, the secret soul also takes pleasure in everything so that it can get experience. So the secret soul takes a pleasure in the strife and effort, and even pleasure in adversity and suffering. Now that's very interesting. If you look into yourself and you've had some bad experience, after some time, it will be very interesting to you to see. Okay, I got frightened, but now you are laughing at the incident that happened. Okay, so at that time there was fear and there was a recoil, but afterwards you will enjoy the experience if you came out and you will speak about it with some amount of even affection. You will speak of it, I had this experience, it was an accident, but you will take even pleasure, it happens. Okay? So, but Srivni is saying something very interesting. He's saying even when the unpleasant thing happens, the soul behind is taking pleasure even in the unpleasantness while it is happening. But the mind is rebelling. Okay? But then after some time, later on, in retrospection, they're saying, and in memory, you recoil that bad experience with some amount of even humor and pleasure. Okay? So, yeah, we had that experience. It was fantastic. Okay? We'll enjoy it in memory, in pleasure. Because the intensity of that pain has gone away now. Now you can look at it more objectively. You actually start relating the experience to others also. Okay. So, our secret soul takes a pleasure in the strife and effort, and even a pleasure in adversity and suffering, which can be complete enough in memory and retrospect. Okay? You can enjoy what happened to you unpleasant after it has happened. But it's pleasant too behind at the time. When it's happening also, the soul is enjoying the tragedy, but the mind is rebelling against the tragedy. But what really attracts the soul is the whole mingled weft of the thing we call life. And Shyam is going to explain that very clearly in the next few sentences. The soul is enjoying the whole mingled weft of the thing we call life with all its disturbance of struggle and seeking, its attractions and repulsions, its offer and its menace, its varieties of every kind. It wants variety. The Rajasic desire soul in us, a monotonous pleasure, success without struggle, joy without a shadow, must, after a time, become fatiguing, insipid, cloying. It needs a background of darkness to give full value to its enjoyment of light. Okay. So it's very clear that if there is only light, I will not give it any value. I will not even understand that I am in light. But if there is darkness, then you see that relatively, oh, the light is wonderful. But if something is there forever, then you will not appreciate it. You will not be able to recognize it. This is what he says in the Life Divine, in the chapter, The Delight of Existence, Solution and the problem and the solution. He says there that normally in man, there is both. Delight is also there and there is also suffering. But what he is saying is that in the neutral state also it is ananda. But you don't appreciate it because it is not the extreme. Extreme becomes pleasure and the other extreme becomes pain. But the neutrality of your condition is actually ananda. And you don't appreciate that. Okay? That's what he's saying. So I go back to our text. Okay? So it needs a background of darkness to give full value to its enjoyment of life. Yeah. For the happiness it seeks and enjoys is of that very nature. It is in its very essence relative and dependent on the perception and experience of its opposite. You will not give value to truth unless there is falsehood. You will not give value to happiness unless there is a little bit of unhappiness. That's what solution. It's quite easy to understand that. Right? The joy of the soul in the dualities is the secret of the mind's pleasure in living. Yeah. Even the mind wants to continue living. And why is that? Because from the background, the soul is saying, I am enjoying everything. The mind does not enjoy everything. But the soul's enjoyment of everything is percolating into the outer mind and it is translating in the mind as wanting to continue to live. So, this is what is said. Now we can go to the next para. Ask it to rise out of this disturbance. So, Tarika read, now somebody else has to read. Pallavi can read if she wants.
Yes, Rangada.
Yeah, go ahead. So I think Seema is asking whether the internet
She
is
can read.
everybody. Maybe it's an individual problem, Seema.
Yeah, we can hear clearly.
Yeah.
No,
because-
my connector got disconnected also.
Acha, okay. So that also is individual.
Pallavi, you can continue reading now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Others, Archana, you would like to read?
Now, Pallavi, you read.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead.
Ask it to rise out of all this disturbance to the unmingled joy of the pure bliss soul, which all the time secretly supports its strength in the struggle and makes its own continued existence possible. It will draw back at once from the call. It does not believe in such an existence, or it believes that it would not be life, that it would not be at all the varied existence in the world around it.
You go ahead, read. Read. I'm taking the call.
Believes that it would not be life, that it would not be at all the varied existence in the world around it, in which it is accustomed to take pleasure. It would be something tasteless and without savor. Or it feels that the effort would be too difficult for it. It recoils from the struggle of the ascent. Although in reality, the spiritual change is not at all more difficult than the realization of the dreams the desire soul pursues, nor entails more struggle and labor in the attainment than the tremendous effort which the desire soul expends in its passionate chase after its own transit objects of pleasure and desire. The true cause of its unwillingness is that it is asked to rise above its own atmosphere and breathe a rarer and purer air of life, whose bliss and power it cannot realize and hardly even conceives as real, while the joy of this lower turbid nature is to it the one thing familiar and palpable. Nor is this lower satisfaction in itself a thing evil and unprofitable. It is rather the condition for the upward evolution of our human nature out of the tamasic ignorance and inertia to which its material being is most subject. It is the Rajasic stage of the graded ascent of man towards the supreme self knowledge, power, and bliss. But if we rest eternally on this plane, the Madhyama Gati of the Gita, our ascent remains unfinished, the evolution of the soul incomplete. Through the sattvic being and nature to that which is beyond the three gunas lies the way of the soul to its perfection.
Okay. I had to interrupt. I got a call because I think many of you will know in care, there is Padma who looks after care, and her husband is Raju. He is very well known to me from a long time, and he has passed away in Jipmar yesterday. And he had absolutely a miraculous life. His brain, he has had 5 operations. And the doctors are absolutely stunned. How can this be? It normally doesn't happen like that. Archana, people probably know Padma.
Yes, Ranganath. I also know that he passed away in the morning, 5:30.
I didn't know. That's why I got a call.
It didn't strike me that I should have informed you because he was in press for a long, long time.
Yes, he was very close to our family also. He used to teach. He was my colleague in press also. And his daughter, her name is Sumati. She's a brilliant.
Sumati, yeah.
Sumati is brilliant.
She's a very good dancer also.
Yeah, she's very talented. She's tremendously talented in many ways and very intelligent. Okay. She gave a talk in Sanskrit in knowledge, which even Jugalda appreciated very much. So anyway, it was all known that he will pass away, but it was a question of when. So, okay, we come back to our paragraph. So, what Simon is saying is very interesting here, and we'll look at what he said. Ask it. It what? The joy of the soul in the duality is the mind. Okay. Ask it to rise out of all this disturbance to the unmingled joy of the pure bliss soul, which all the time secretly supports its strength in the struggle and makes its own continued existence possible. It will draw back at once from the all. So this is stunning what Srimad is saying. But I'll put other words, what Srimad said later on in other places, and it will make sense. Because the tamasic principle occurs, and nobody wants to change the conditions of one's life very easily. Okay? You tell somebody that I will give you total pleasure. So you come to me, I'll show you the way. But the 90% of the time, the people say, no, I'm quite happy with what I have. Okay. So they don't want to change.
Ranganath, it reminds me of Hound of Heaven, Francis Thompson's poem,
Yes.
Hound of Heaven.
Exactly. In fact, Srimad says in Savitri, he says, the world is in love with its own ignorance. Okay? Doesn't want to change. Okay? So, the world is in love with its own ignorance. With its own ignorance and pain. This is Savitri. And I can give you the reference also. Okay? Page 448. He says that very clearly. So this is what Srimad is saying, that if you tell someone to, I'll give you total pleasure. Only pleasure. They say, no, it will draw back at once from the call. In the Hound of Heaven also, what Pallavi is referring to, the God is pursuing the soul. But the soul says, no, he is running away from the Hound of Heaven. But the Hound won't leave him until finally the Hound catches him. The Hound of Heaven. It's a beautiful poem. By the way, it is written by a very poor cobbler. Huh? Francis Thompson was a cobbler. Okay? And he is famous only because of this one poem, The Hound of Heaven. Okay, we get back to our text. It will draw back at once from the call. it does not believe in such an existence. What is the it? Not the soul. He is talking of the mind. Okay? It does not believe in such an existence. Or it believes that it would not be life, that it would not be at all the varied existence in the world around it, in which it is accustomed to take pleasure. It would be something tasteless and without savor. Now that's very interesting when we are discussing the self in the class, okay? In many classes, you tell them that you go to the self and you are in absolutely a peaceful condition without pleasure and without pain. No pleasure, but no pain also. Pleasure also is absent. So often intelligent children say, good God, then what a monotonous life. How can it be pleasant? Okay. So this is what simply describing in another way. But the experience of the self, okay, is something, the peace and the enjoyment that is there is something quite different. But let me also tell you that you have to be quite developed in soul to be appreciate the silence of the mind. Because if you remember the incident, very interesting incident, where Sremda's Tamil teacher, okay, Sremda was testing out his own powers and he gave the silent mind to this Tamil teacher. And this Tamil teacher came rushing to him and said, Sir, I have become an idiot. I can't think. He didn't appreciate the silence in the mind. And Sremda made a comment afterwards in the evening talks. He said, he didn't become an idiot. He was an idiot to begin with. So it's an interesting story. It shows that everybody, all the experiences that come, okay, you have to be ready for it. In fact, when there is a descent from above, it can be of light, it can be of power, it can be of enjoyment, but you may not welcome it. I know of cases where a descent was occurring and there was fear in the person. Okay. And another lady, an Italian lady who comes here from Italy, she once told me that there was a golden light coming into her mind. Okay. But she didn't want it. She told me very clearly. A part of me was not wanting it. The vital was rebelling. But she was so pleasant that her life has become a search for that light again. And she keeps coming to the ashram every now and then. Okay. So, this is what Sremda is describing here. The mind is not ready, the soul may be ready. And if the soul is ready, it will welcome the change, but not the mind. Okay. You have an outer life and you have an inner life. The inner life is that of the soul, and there also it depends on the amount of development. So it depends entirely whether you are fit for the change. So, I go back.
Ranganath,
Yeah, tell me.
if the mind is ready and the vital and the physical is not ready, then also there is a problem, no?
No, that is the same thing. That is 90% of the time it is like that. It's a mind that is ready earlier than the vital and the body. That is 90% of the time. That's why Sremda starts with the mind. He says, let us start with the mind, in the soul in mind. Okay? The Manomaya Purusha. So Sremda's yoga starts with the mind because the mind is the most plastic and the most likely to welcome the change, but not the vital. For a long time, the mind may accept, but the vital does not accept the change. Let alone the body. We don't even speak of the body. But the mind may accept, but the vital does not. That is the yoga that you have to do.
Then that can be misused by the vital?
That also happens. Okay?
Because if the vital is not ready.
Yeah, it can happen. Suppose you have an experience of light. Okay? The vital will immediately claim it as something wonderful and think that I am great. The vital will distort it. The vital is a very, very imposter. It's a charlatan, as Sremda says. It's a deceiver. It's constantly deceiving you. Doesn't want change. It's full of action. So, we got to get back to our text, okay? So, or it feels that the effort would be too difficult for it. It recoils from the struggle of the ascent, although in reality, the spiritual change is not at all more difficult than the realization of the dreams the desire soul pursues. nor entails more struggle and labor in the attainment than the tremendous effort which the desired soul expends in its passionate chase after its own transient objects of pleasure and desire. So what Swami is saying is very interesting. The amount of effort that the vital will put in to get something that it wants, if that effort was put into the other way, it would be so successful. But it does not do that. Okay. So it's very interesting. I know of two cases where mother said to the person concerned, she said that you are capable of yoga, and if you do yoga, you will be absolutely successful. But if you want to do business, you will be equally successful there. So this is exactly what Seth is saying here also, that the vital energy that is there, if it is directed to the right path, it will be successful. But it does not do that. It wants limited things. It does not want unlimited things. That's a human nature. You are in love with your own ignorance and your own foolishness. It sounds very funny, but it's absolutely true. You don't want to change. To accept change anywhere, at any level, is very difficult. It's not easy. The normal first tendency is, I don't want to change. Okay. Now, now Siddha is saying, the true cause of this unwillingness to change, I'm adding the words to change, is that it is asked to rise above its own atmosphere and breathe a rarer and purer air of life. That effort, okay, is not worth it. It's like, I put a note here, a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. So that you tell them that I'll give you eternal pleasure, that's two birds in the bush. But that is not as good as what you have already in your hand. The true cause of unwillingness is that it is asked to rise above its own atmosphere and breathe a rarer and purer air of life, whose bliss and power it cannot realize and hardly even conceives as real. While the joy of this lower turbid nature is to it the one thing familiar and palpable. What I've experienced is good enough for me. That's what the normal man will say. Nor is this lower satisfaction in itself a thing evil and unprofitable. Now look what Sandra is saying. He's saying even the pleasures of the vital is not something evil and unprofitable. Why? He's saying that because it gives you experience in life. And when the change comes, then you are ready to accept it. So first you are building yourself up with all these things. And after you have built yourself up, then you want to change, but not before that. Nor is this lower satisfaction in itself a thing evil and unprofitable. It is rather a condition for the upward evolution of our human nature out of the tamasic ignorance and inertia to which the material being is most subject. The physical body is based in the principle of tamas. The rajasic principle is based in action, and not tamas but action and energy. So all this has to be experienced before you want something else. You first enjoy these experiences and then you realize that the experience is mixed. So you want only joy and you don't want the pain. So you are ready now for the next step. That's what Sandra is saying. It is rather a condition for the upward evolution of our human nature out of the tamasic ignorance and inertia to which its material being, the body, is most subject. Okay? It is the rajasic stage of the graded ascent of man towards a supreme self-knowledge, power and bliss. But if we rest eternally on this plane, the madhyama gati, okay? The madhyama, not the bar on the A, it makes it long because gati is feminine, so madhyama gati of the Gita. Our ascent remains unfinished. The evolution of the soul incomplete. So you have to go beyond the vital and mind. You have to go beyond it. Through the sattvic being and nature, to that which is beyond the three gunas, lies the way of the soul towards perfection. So, from the Tamasic body, which is there in nature, you come to life, which becomes then Rajasic, and from there you go to the Sattvic, and then from the Sattvic you go into spiritual life. So there's a gradation. So all the lower movements are not useless and unprofitable. You profit from them. They are earlier stages. Kindergarten, then the Della form, and then finally school, and finally knowledge. Okay, so it's a gradation. Okay, so we have time. Oh, we have 5 minutes. I think we can read the next one. The movement which will lead us out of the disturbance. We have read 2 paragraphs. We can read one more paragraph. Maybe we can just read it today. So now who can read? Anyone can read. Okay, so Archana Devi was being invited by Pallavi. If she has a text and she wants to read, she can. Otherwise, Kiran can read. Okay, Kiran, go ahead.
Yes, Ranganath.
Go ahead. The movement.
The movement which will lead us out of the disturbances of the lower nature must be necessarily a movement towards equality in the mind, in the emotional temperament, in the soul. But it is to be noted that although in the end we must arrive at a superiority of all the 3 gunas of the lower nature, it is yet in its incipience by a resort to one or other of the three that the movement must begin. The beginning of equality may be sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic, for there is a possibility in the human nature of a tamasic quality. It may be purely tamasic, the heavy equability of a vital temperament rendered inertly irresponsive to the shocks of existence by a sort of dull insensibility, undesirous of the joy of life. Or it may result for awareness of the emotions and desires accumulated by a surfeit and satiety of the pleasure, or else, on the contrary, a disappointment and a disgust and shrinking from the pain of life, a lassitude of fear and horror and dislike of the world. It is then in its nature a fixed movement, rajaso tamasic, but the lower quality predominates. Or approaching the sattvic principle, it may aid itself by the intellectual perception that the desires of life cannot be satisfied, that the soul is too weak to master life, that the whole thing is nothing but sorrow and transient effort, and nowhere in it is there any real truth or sanity or light or happiness. This is the sattvo tamasic principle of equality, and is not so much equality, though it may lead to that, as indifference or equal refusal. Essentially, the movement of tamasic quality is a generalization of nature's principle of jugupsa, or self protecting recoil, extended from the shunning of particular painful effects to a shunning of the whole life of nature itself, as in some leading to pain and self tormenting, and not to the delight which the soul demands.
No. So this paragraph, now Shremya is going to describe equality, and he is going to describe the tamasic equality, the rajasic equality, and the sattvic equality, and then finally the spiritual equality. So one by one in each para he will describe these. Okay. Equality also is graded. Everything is a gradation. The principle of gradation is very clearly, it has to be understood. Everything is graded. It's like a ramp which goes slowly upwards. So this we will take up next time because there's no time now. It's already 8:39. So we will take it up next time. We'll redo this one. So I'll make a note because in this class I make a note myself on my. So okay. Au revoir, everybody.
Au revoir, Rangada. Merci beaucoup. Bonne journée.
This chapter equality is becoming very interesting. It's full of ideas and very psychological, full of psychological truths of the human being. Okay, so we'll meet you next Saturday for this one. Au revoir, everybody, and have a
Thank you,
nice day.
Dada. Arova.
Okay.
Thank you, Rangada.
Au revoir.
Okay. Au
Au revoir,
revoir.
Ranga.